The words hit me like a slap across the face right there in the middle of Walmart, honey. We're ashamed you're our mother. My own daughter, Jessica, said those words to me while I was standing in the checkout line wearing my McDonald's uniform after a 12-hour shift. And y'all, I could feel every eye in that store turn to look at us.
The cashier stopped scanning items, the lady behind me stepped back, and I swear the whole world went silent except for the sound of my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces right there on that linoleum floor. I was 68 years old, sweetie, and I'd been working at McDonald's for the past 3 years since my husband Frank died, not because I wanted to, but because Social Security wasn't enough to cover my medications and keep the lights on. My uniform was clean, pressed every morning at 4:30 before my shift, but it was still just a fast food uniform to my daughter. Standing there with my name tag that said, "Dorothy, happy to serve you," pinned to my chest, I felt smaller than I'd ever felt in my entire life. "Jessica," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the beeping of the scanner. "What are you talking about, honey?" She looked at me with those cold eyes that used to be so warm when she was little, when she'd run to me after school with scraped knees and broken hearts. "Look at you, Mom. You're embarrassing us. My friends might see you here." She gestured to my uniform like it was something dirty. "Can't you at least try to dress better when you're out in public?" Y'all, I had to grip the handle of my shopping cart to keep from falling over. This was my baby girl, the one I'd rocked to sleep every night for years, the one I saved every penny for to buy her first car, to pay for her wedding, the one I'd worked double shifts at the diner in the 70s and 80s to put through college. Before I tell you what happened next, and honey, this part is going to absolutely shock you. If you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. You know I get so excited when I see y'all in the comments. Speaking of which, what state are you calling home right now? Drop it down below. And sweetie, tell me, have you ever had family treat you like you didn't matter? Because your stories help me know I'm not alone in this crazy world. Now, let me tell you what I discovered next, because what they did was about to backfire in the most beautiful way. "Jessica," I said, and I could hear my voice starting to shake like a leaf in a windstorm. "I'm working to support myself. Your father's medical bills took everything we had. I'm doing the best I can, sweetheart." She rolled her eyes, actually rolled her eyes at her own mother, and said, "That's the problem. You're not even trying. Look at Mrs. Henderson from church. She's your age and she volunteers at the hospital, dresses nicely, does important things. You're just this." The woman behind me in line cleared her throat uncomfortably, and I realized we were creating a scene. My cheeks burned with shame as I fumbled for my wallet, trying to pay for my groceries. Generic bread, store-brand peanut butter, the cheapest coffee I could find. Everything in my cart screamed, "Poor old lady." And for the first time, I saw myself through my daughter's eyes. "We'll talk about this later," Jessica said, but her tone suggested we wouldn't be talking about anything. "I have to go. Richard is waiting in the car." Richard was her husband, my son-in-law, who barely acknowledged my existence anymore. "Maybe you could think about finding something more appropriate for someone your age." She walked away, leaving me standing there with tears threatening to spill over right there in front of everyone. The cashier, a sweet young girl who couldn't have been more than 20, looked at me with such pity that it made everything worse. "That'll be $23.47, she said gently. I handed her my 20 and my crumpled dollar bills, counting out the change from the bottom of my purse. My hands were shaking so bad I dropped a quarter, and when I bent to pick it up, I heard someone behind me mutter, Oh, some people just don't know when to step aside gracefully. Walking to my 15-year-old Honda Civic, the one Frank bought used right before he got sick, I kept replaying Jessica's words over and over. We're ashamed you're our mother. Not just I'm ashamed, we're ashamed. That meant my son Michael felt the same way. Driving home to my little 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, I couldn't stop the tears from coming. 25 years I'd lived in this house with Frank, raised our 2 children here, celebrated birthdays and Christmases, nursed them through chickenpox and teenage heartbreak. Now it felt like a prison, a monument to my failures as a mother. I pulled into my driveway and just sat in the car for the longest time, honey. The neighbor's dog was barking, kids were riding bicycles down the street, and life was going on all around me like nothing had happened. But something fundamental had shifted in my world. My own children were ashamed of me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Jessica with her math homework, where Michael had announced he got into college, where Frank and I had planned our retirement that never came, and I tried to make sense of what had happened. When had I become such a disappointment to them? I thought about Mrs. Henderson, the woman Jessica had mentioned. Eleanor Henderson was a widow, too, but she had money. Her husband had been a banker, left her well provided for. She could afford to volunteer at the hospital because she didn't need to work 3 jobs just to keep her head above water like I have for most of my adult life. The phone rang around 9 o'clock, and for a moment my heart jumped thinking maybe Jessica was calling to apologize. But it was my son Michael calling from Denver, and honey, what he said next made that Walmart incident look like a gentle tap on the shoulder. "Mom," he said, and I could hear the frustration in his voice before he even started. "Jessica told me what happened today. We need to talk." "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad you called. I was hoping we could clear this up. I didn't mean to embarrass anyone. I was just—" "That's the problem, Mom. You never mean to, but you do, constantly." His words cut deeper than Jessica's had, because Michael's had always been my gentle boy, my sensitive one. If he was saying this, it meant things were worse than I'd imagined. "What do you mean, honey?" I asked, but part of me was afraid to hear the answer. "The McDonald's job, for one thing. Do you know how hard it is for us when people ask what our mother does for work? Oh, she flips burgers. It's humiliating, Mom. And your house. When's the last time you updated anything? The carpet is from the 80s, the wallpaper is peeling, and don't get me started on that car you drive." Y'all, I felt like I was being attacked from all sides. "Michael, honey, I'm doing the best I can with what I have. Your father's medical bills took everything we had. You know that." "That was 3 years ago, Mom. At some point, you have to pick yourself up and try to improve your situation. Get a better job, fix up the house, buy some decent clothes. Act like the mother of 2 successful adults instead of whatever this is." Whatever this is? My own son didn't even know how to categorize what I'd become. "I have been trying," I said, and I could feel my voice getting smaller and smaller. "I work 40 hours a week, sometimes more. I keep the house clean, I pay my bills, Working at McDonald's at your age isn't trying, Mom. It's giving up. And we can't keep pretending it's embarrassing for us." The line went quiet for a moment, and I could hear him breathing on the other end. Finally, he said the words that would change everything. "Jessica and I have been talking, and we think maybe it's time you considered moving somewhere more appropriate for your situation. Maybe a nice senior community where you'd fit in better. We could help you find something." Fit in better. like I was a mismatched puzzle piece that needed to be filed away somewhere out of sight. This is my home, Michael. I raised you children here. Your father and I— Dad's gone, Mom, and holding on to the past isn't helping anyone, especially not us. We have reputations to think about, careers, social circles. When people find out our mother works fast food and lives in a rundown house, it reflects on us. After we hung up, I sat in that threadbare chair for hours, sweetie, just staring at the walls of my home. The wallpaper Michael had mentioned was the same pattern Frank and I had chosen together in 1987. We'd spent the whole Saturday hanging it, laughing when we got it crooked, promising we'd redo it someday when we had more money. Someday never came. The carpet he was embarrassed by was the one we'd saved up for when the kids were in high school. Forest green. It had been so beautiful when we first installed it. Now I could see it through their eyes. Worn, dated, shabby. But you know what, honey? This house was paid for. Every month for 30 years, Frank and I had made that mortgage payment, sometimes choosing between groceries and the house note. But we always chose the house because it was ours. It was security. It was home. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hurt feelings and second-guessing of myself. I'd catch my reflection in the McDonald's bathroom mirror and see what my children saw. An old woman in a polyester uniform, gray hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, sensible shoes that had seen better days. Was this really what I'd become? My manager, Carlos, was a sweet man in his 30s who'd always treated me with respect. But even he seemed to look at me differently now, like he was seeing me through my children's eyes. One afternoon during my break, I overheard two of the younger workers talking. I feel bad for Dorothy, working here at her age. Where's her family? I heard she has kids, but they never visit or call. Must be some story there. Some story there. If only they knew. It was on a particularly difficult Thursday. I remember because it was the day we'd always gone grocery shopping together when Frank was alive, when everything changed. I was cleaning out Frank's desk, something I'd been putting off for 3 years, when I found an envelope addressed to me in his handwriting. It said, "For my Dorothy, when you need to remember who you are on the outside." Y'all, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely open that envelope. Inside was a letter in Frank's careful handwriting, the same handwriting that had written me love notes for 42 years. It began, "My dearest Dot," and I had to stop reading because the tears were coming so fast I couldn't see the words. Frank was the only person who'd ever called me Dot, said Dorothy was too formal for someone as warm as me. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you're having one of those days when you forget how extraordinary you are. I'm writing this while you're at work, your second job at the diner, because that's who you are, Dot. You work. You provide. You never give up. I had to set the letter down and take a deep breath, honey. Even from beyond the grave, Frank knew exactly what I needed to hear. I want you to remember some things, my love. Remember how you worked 3 jobs to put both kids through college when I was laid off in the recession of '91. Remember how you took care of your mother for 2 years when she had Alzheimer's, never once complaining, even when Jessica said it was too much trouble to visit. Remember how you held our family together when Michael got in trouble with those boys in high school and you spent your savings on a lawyer to keep him out of jail? My God, I had forgotten about Michael's legal troubles when he was 17. He'd gotten mixed up with some older boys who were stealing cars, and if I hadn't hired that lawyer, he might have gone to prison instead of college. Jessica never knew. We'd hidden it from them to protect both of them. Remember how you worked double shifts at the hospital during my chemotherapies, not just to pay the bills, but because you said work kept you sane when everything else was falling apart. Remember how you never missed a single one of my chemotherapy sessions, even when it meant losing pay you couldn't afford to lose? The letter went on for 3 pages, Frank reminding me of things I'd done, sacrifices I'd made, ways I'd held our family together through crisis after crisis, things my children had either forgotten or never known about. The important thing I need you to remember, Dot, is this. You are not defined by your job, your house, your car, or your clothes. You are defined by your heart, your strength, your unwavering love for your family, and your refusal to give up no matter how hard things get. Anyone who can't see that is blind, even if they're your own children. At the bottom of the letter was a P.S. that made me gasp out loud, y'all. P.S. Check the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. There's something there I've been saving for when you might need it most. I love you always. Frank. The filing cabinet was in our bedroom closet, covered with dust and forgotten. The bottom drawer was stuck, but I finally got it open, and inside was a manila folder marked for Dot's future. Inside that folder, sweetie, were papers I never knew existed. Stock certificates, savings bonds, a life insurance policy I didn't know Frank had taken out, and a letter from an attorney's office dated 2 months before Frank died. The attorney's letter explained everything. Frank had been secretly setting aside money for years, small amounts from his pension, returns from investments I didn't even know he'd made. The life insurance policy was separate from the one I used to pay for his funeral and medical bills. This was Frank's secret nest egg, and it was worth more than $200,000. $200,000 that I'd never claimed because I never knew it existed. My hands were shaking as I reached for the phone to call the attorney's office. The number was still good, and when I explained who I was, the lawyer, Mr. Patterson, remembered Frank immediately. Mrs. Murphy, I've been wondering when you'd contact us. Your husband left very specific instructions about these assets. He said you'd find them when you were ready, when you needed them most. Mr. Patterson, and I had to clear my throat because my voice was barely working. Are you telling me this money is really mine? Yes, ma'am. All of it. The life insurance payout alone is $150,000. The investments in bonds bring the total to just over $230,000. We've been managing the investments as your husband requested, and they've grown considerably in the past 3 years. I hung up the phone and just sat there in stunned silence, honey. Frank had provided for me even in death, had seen this day coming when I'd doubt myself, when I'd feel small and worthless. He'd known I'd need proof that I was worth something. But even with this windfall, I wasn't ready to make any major changes yet. Something told me to wait, to think, to plan. And thank God I did, because what happened next showed me exactly who my children really were. It was Jessica who called first, about a week later. "Mom," she said, and her voice had that fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. "Richard and I have been talking, and we'd like to help you find that senior community we mentioned." "That's thoughtful of you, dear," I said carefully, not mentioning the money Frank had left me. "We've actually found a place, Sunset Manor. It's very affordable, and it would be perfect for someone in your situation. We could help you sell the house. You could probably get enough to cover the first few years at Sunset Manor, and then Social Security would take care of the rest." Sunset Manor. I knew that place. It was the cheapest senior housing in town, the kind of place where people went when they had nowhere else to go. The parking lot was always full of beat-up cars and ambulances. "I appreciate you thinking of me," I said, "but I'm not ready to move yet." "Mom!" Jessica's voice got sharp, the way it used to when she was a teenager and didn't get her way. you can't keep living in that house. It's falling apart, and you can't afford to maintain it on a McDonald's salary. We're trying to help you be realistic about your future." "And what exactly is my future, Jessica?" I asked. "Well, honestly, working retail or fast food until you're too old to work, then living on Social Security in some tiny apartment somewhere, unless you make a change now while you still can." After we hung up, I realized something that made my blood run cold, y'all. Jessica and Richard wanted me to sell my house, my paid-off house worth at least $180,000 to pay for a few years at Sunset Manor. And when that money ran out, I'd be stuck there with nothing, dependent on Social Security and Medicaid for the rest of my life. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to get me out of the way with my own money. 2 days later, Michael called with a similar conversation. "Mom, Jessica told me about the senior community idea. I think it's brilliant. You could sell the house, maybe get $150,000 if you're lucky, and that would cover your care for several years." "What about after that money runs out?" I asked. "Well, that's years away, Mom. You'll figure it out when you get there. The important thing is getting you settled somewhere appropriate now." Appropriate. That word again. "Michael," I said, choosing my words carefully, "what if I told you I didn't want to sell the house, that I wanted to stay here?" He sighed heavily. "Then I say you're being stubborn and unrealistic. Mom, you're holding on to the past instead of planning for the future. And honestly, it's embarrassing for Jessica and me to have to explain to people why our mother is still working fast food and living in a rundown house when there are better options." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Mr. Patterson, Frank's attorney, and made an appointment to see him first thing Monday morning. "Mr. Patterson," I said when I walked into his office, "I need to ask you something. If I wanted to change my last name, how would I go about doing that?" He raised his eyebrows, but didn't question my motives. "It's relatively simple for someone your age, Mrs. Murphy. You'd file a petition with the court, pay a small fee, and as long as there's no fraud involved, it's typically approved within a few weeks. May I ask why?" "I'm considering some changes in my life," I said carefully. "I want to make sure I understand all my options." That week, I did something I'd never done before in my entire life. I took 3 days off work, told Carlos I had a family emergency, which wasn't technically a lie, and I went shopping. But not the kind of shopping my children expected. First, I went to a nice salon in the better part of town and got my hair cut and styled. The stylist, a lovely woman named Patricia, listened while I explained that I wanted to look like a woman who had her life together. "Honey," she said, running her fingers through my gray hair, "you've got beautiful bone structure and gorgeous eyes. We're going to make you look like the queen you already are inside." 2 hours later, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My gray hair was cut in a modern style that took 10 years off my face. She'd shown me how to do simple makeup that enhanced my features without looking overdone. "You look fantastic," she said as I admired myself in the dressing room mirror, wearing a beautiful navy dress that actually fit my figure. "Special occasion?" "You could say that," I replied. By Friday, I looked like a completely different person. And I felt different too. For the first time in years, I felt like Dorothy Murphy, not just some old lady who worked at McDonald's. That Saturday, I went to the lawyer's office and signed the papers to change my name. I was no longer Dorothy Murphy. I was Dorothy Harrison. Harrison was my maiden name, the name I had had before I married Frank, before I became the mother of children who were ashamed of me. Dorothy Harrison was going to be somebody entirely different. The next part of my plan requires some research. And honey, the internet is a wonderful thing when you know how to use it. I spent hours at the library looking up information about my children's lives, their social media accounts, their professional networks. I wanted to understand exactly what kind of life they were living. What was so important to them that their own mother had become an embarrassment? What I found made everything crystal clear. Jessica and Richard lived in a beautiful subdivision called Maple Heights, in a house worth at least $400,000. Her Facebook page was full of pictures from charity events, wine tastings, country club functions. She volunteered for the local art museum and served on the board of some children's literacy program. Her Instagram was all about her blessed life and her amazing husband. Michael's life in Denver was similar. Big house, beautiful wife, 2 kids I barely knew because they visited so rarely. His LinkedIn showed he was a senior executive at a tech company. His social media was full of ski trips, expensive restaurants, professional achievements. Both of my children were living exactly the kind of life they wanted me to live. Upper middle class, respectable, socially acceptable. The problem wasn't that they couldn't afford to help me. The problem was that helping me might interfere with their image. On Monday morning, I walked into McDonald's wearing one of my new outfits and my new hairstyle. Carlos did a double take when he saw me. "Dorothy, wow, you look amazing. What's the occasion?" "I'm giving you 2 weeks of notice, Carlos," I said, handing him my letter of resignation. "I'm moving on to other opportunities." He looked genuinely sad, which made me feel good about the decision. "I'm going to miss you, Dorothy. You're one of the best workers we've ever had. Are you sure about this?" "I'm sure, honey. It's time for the next chapter." That same day, I made appointments with a financial advisor and a real estate agent. Not to sell my house, but to understand exactly what my options were. The financial advisor's eyes lit up when I showed him Frank's documents. "Mrs. Harrison?" He looked confused by the name change, but I just smiled and nodded. "With proper investment, this money could provide you with a very comfortable retirement. You could travel, live well, pursue hobbies. You could even help your children if you wanted to." If I wanted to. That was the key phrase.
The real estate agent confirmed what I'd suspected. My house, with some updates, could be worth much more than the $150,000 my children had estimated. The neighborhood had been slowly gentrifying, and houses like mine were in demand. "With about $30,000 in renovations," she said, walking through the rooms, "this house could sell for $220,000, maybe more. Or you could renovate and stay here. It would be a beautiful home again." That evening, I called a contractor and scheduled an estimate for updating the house. New carpet, fresh paint, updated fixtures, modern appliances. I was going to make this house into the home Frank and I had always dreamed it could be. While I waited for the contractor, I started planning the rest of my new life as Dorothy Harrison. I researched volunteer opportunities, travel programs for seniors, investment strategies. For the first time in years, the future looked bright instead of scary. But I wasn't done with my children yet. They had made their feelings clear, and I wanted to make mine just as clear. The contractor's estimate was exactly what I had expected: $28,000 to turn my house into something beautiful. I told him to start immediately. While the renovation was happening, I stayed in a nice hotel downtown, the kind of place I'd never stayed before because it seemed too extravagant. Every morning I'd have breakfast in the hotel restaurant, read the newspaper, and plan my day. I felt like a different person entirely. Jessica called during the second week of renovation, and her voice was sharp with irritation. "Mom, I drove by the house to check on you, and there are construction trucks everywhere. What's going on? Are you finally getting it ready to sell?" "Just making some improvements, dear," I said calmly. "Improvements? Mom, that's throwing good money after bad. You should be saving every penny for your future care." "I'm taking care of my future just fine, Jessica." "With what money? You can't afford major renovations on a McDonald's salary." I paused for effect, sipping my hotel coffee while looking out at the city skyline. "I quit McDonald's, sweetheart." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Jessica sputtered, "You quit? Mom, what are you thinking? How are you going to support yourself?" "I'm figuring it out. Don't worry about me." "Mom, this is exactly the kind of impulsive behavior that worries us. You can't just quit your job and start throwing money around. What if you run out? What if something happens? You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years, honey." After we hung up, I knew Jessica would call Michael immediately. Sure enough, my phone rang 20 minutes later. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" Michael's voice was angry in a way I rarely heard. "Jessica said you quit your job and you're renovating the house? Have you lost your mind?" "I've actually found it, sweetheart," I said calmly. "Found what? Mom, you can't afford to be unemployed. You can't afford renovations. You're acting like someone having a breakdown." "Michael, do you remember when you were 17 and got arrested with those boys who were stealing cars?" The line went quiet. "What does it have to do with anything?" "Do you remember how I worked extra shifts for 6 months to pay for a lawyer to keep you out of jail? How I never told Jessica because I wanted to protect both of you? How I spent our entire savings account to give you a second chance?" "Mom, that was 30 years ago. What's your point?" "My point is, honey, is that I've been taking care of this family my entire adult life. I've worked multiple jobs, sacrificed my own dreams, gone without things I wanted so you and Jessica could have everything you needed. And now that you're both successful adults, you're ashamed of me." "We're not ashamed of you, Mom. We just think," you said, and I quote, "it's embarrassing for us when people find out our mother works fast food. You want me to sell my house and move to Sunset Manor so I won't be an embarrassment to your social circles. That's not... We want you to be comfortable, Mom. Comfortable or out of sight." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. 3 weeks later, the renovations were complete, and y'all, my house looked like something from a magazine. The new hardwood floors gleamed, the walls were painted in beautiful modern colors, and the updated kitchen was something I had dreamed about for years. The contractor had even suggested some structural changes that opened up the living area and made everything feel bigger and brighter. I moved back home and invited the neighbors over for a housewarming party. The same neighbors who'd watched me struggle for years, who'd seen me leave for work at McDonald's every morning, and who'd whispered about the poor widow who couldn't maintain our house. Mrs. Chen from next door couldn't stop staring. "Dorothy, this is incredible. How did you... this must have cost a fortune." "Sometimes life surprises you," I said, serving wine and cheese in my beautiful new kitchen. Word spread quickly throughout the neighborhood that Dorothy Murphy had somehow transformed her house overnight. But of course, Dorothy Murphy no longer existed legally. I was Dorothy Harrison now, a woman with means and options. That Sunday, I dressed in one of my new outfits and went to church for the first time in months. I'd been too embarrassed to go while I was working at McDonald's, too tired after long shifts to make the effort. But Dorothy Harrison had no reason to hide. The reaction was everything I'd hoped for, and more. People who'd barely acknowledged me for years suddenly wanted to chat, to compliment my hair, to ask about my new look. Eleanor Henderson, the woman Jessica had held up as an example of appropriate behavior for someone my age, made a point of sitting with me during coffee hour. "Dorothy, you look wonderful," she said. "I've been meaning to ask, would you be interested in joining our hospital auxiliary? We're always looking for dedicated volunteers, and I have a feeling you'd be perfect." Perfect? When was the last time anyone had called me perfect? "I'd love to hear more about it," I said. That afternoon, Jessica called. Her voice was strained, like she was trying very hard to control herself. "Mom, Eleanor Henderson called me. She said you looked amazing at church today and that you're thinking about volunteering at the hospital." "That's right, dear. I'm looking forward to it." "Mom, where is this money coming from? The renovations, the new clothes, quitting your job? I'm worried you're being scammed by someone. This isn't you." "How would you know what I'm like, Jessica? When's the last time we had a real conversation about anything other than how you embarrass me?" "That's not fair, Mom." "Isn't it? You told me you were ashamed I'm your mother. You wanted me to sell my house and move to Sunset Manor. You never call unless you want something. When exactly have you shown any interest in what I'm actually like?" The conversation ended badly, with Jessica hanging up on me, but I felt lighter afterwards, like I'd finally said things that needed to be said. Over the next few months, my life as Dorothy Harrison blossomed in ways I never could have imagined. I joined the hospital auxiliary and discovered I was good at organizing fundraising events. I enrolled in a senior travel program and took a trip to Italy, something Frank and I had always talked about doing but never could afford. I made new friends, women my age who saw me as an equal rather than an object of pity. I started taking art classes at the community college, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was working multiple jobs and raising children. Most importantly, I started seeing myself differently. Instead of a worn-out old woman who embarrassed her children, I was Dorothy Harrison, a woman with resources, intelligence, and value. Jessica and Michael called occasionally, and I could hear the confusion and frustration in their voices. They couldn't understand where my money was coming from, how I transformed myself so completely. A few times I caught them fishing for information. "Mom, you know we love you and we just want to make sure you're okay," Michael said during one call. "If you've come into some money somehow, maybe we could help you invest it wisely." "I appreciate the concern, sweetheart, but I'm managing just fine." "But Mom, at your age, you need to be careful about financial decisions. Maybe we could meet with your advisor together and make sure you're not being taken advantage of." I almost laughed out loud. Now that they thought I had money, suddenly they were interested in my financial well-being. The truth was, I was being smarter with money than I'd ever been in my life. Frank's nest egg, properly invested, was generating enough income that I could live comfortably without touching the principal. The house renovations had been paid for in cash, and I still had plenty left over. For Christmas that year, I decided to host dinner at my beautiful renovated house. I sent invitations to both my children and their families, making it clear this was a formal dinner party, not the casual gatherings we'd had in the past. Jessica arrived first with Richard and their teenage son, Connor, who I barely knew because they visited so rarely. I watched Jessica's face as she walked through my transformed house, her eyes taking in the hardwood floors, the modern furniture, the artwork I'd purchased during my travels. "Mom," she said, and I could hear the forced casualness in her voice. "The house looks incredible. This must have cost a fortune." "I'm happy with how it turned out," I said simply. Richard was examining the new kitchen appliances with obvious interest. "These are top of the line, Dorothy, professional grade. You must have spent $30,000 just on the kitchen." "About that," I agreed.
Connor, bless his heart, was the most honest of the group. Grandma, this house is sick. It's like one of those home improvement shows. How did you afford all this? Before I could answer, Michael arrived with his wife Sarah and their 2 children, Emma and Jake. The kids I barely knew, my own grandchildren, because visits had been so infrequent over the years. Sarah's reaction was similar to Jessica's, poorly concealed shock at the transformation. Dorothy, this is beautiful, really stunning. You've clearly put a lot of thought and money into this. During dinner, I watched my family carefully. Jessica and Michael kept exchanging meaningful looks, especially when they noticed the expensive wine I'd served, the high-quality ingredients in the meal, the fresh flowers that had clearly come from an upscale florist. Finally, over dessert, Jessica couldn't contain herself anymore. Mom, we need to talk about what's going on here. This house, your new look, quitting your job. Where is this money coming from? We're worried someone might be taking advantage of you. I set down my coffee cup and looked around the table at my family. Taking advantage of me? How, dear? Well, Michael jumped in. Elder financial abuse is more common than people think. Someone could be convincing you to spend money you don't have, or maybe promising you returns on investments that don't exist. Or maybe you're spending money you should be saving for health care or long-term care. At your age, one medical emergency could wipe out everything you have. I smiled sweetly at them all. And what would you suggest I do instead? Be more careful, Jessica said earnestly. More conservative with your spending. Maybe we could help you budget. Make sure you're not making impulsive decisions. Like selling the house and moving to Sunset Manor? I asked. The table went quiet. Sarah looked confused. Clearly, she hadn't been part of those conversations. That was just a suggestion, Mom, Michael said quickly. We thought you might be happier somewhere with people your own age, activities planned for you. You mean somewhere cheaper, where I wouldn't embarrass you anymore? Mom, that's not what we meant, Jessica protested, but her voice lacked conviction. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, returning with a manila folder I'd prepared for this moment. I have something I'd like to share with you all. I pulled out copies of the documents I found in Frank's filing cabinet. The life insurance policy, the investment statements, the lawyer's letters. I spread them out on the table like playing cards. Your father, I said, watching their faces as they realized what they were looking at, was a very smart man. He spent years quietly setting aside money for my future. Money I didn't even know existed until a few months ago, when I was feeling worthless and ashamed of who I'd become. Jessica picked up the life insurance statement with shaking hands. This says, Mom, this says $150,000? That's just the insurance policy. The investments in bonds brought the total to about $230,000. It's grown since then with proper management. Michael was staring at the investment statements like they might disappear if he blinked. Dad did this? He never told us he had this kind of money. He didn't tell me either, sweetheart. He left it for me to find when I needed it most, when I was feeling worthless and ashamed of who I'd become. Sarah, who had been quiet through most of dinner, finally spoke up. Dorothy, this is wonderful. You must be so relieved to have this security. I am, but I've learned something interesting about security. It's not just about having money. It's about having people who love and respect you for who you are, not what you have. The silence that followed was deafening, y'all. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room. Mom, Jessica said carefully, If you've had this money all along, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you invest it properly from the beginning. Could you? Or would you have suggested I use it to buy my way into Sunset Manor so I wouldn't embarrass you anymore? Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Dorothy, I think you're misunderstanding our intentions. Am I? Let me tell you what I understand, Richard. I understand that when I was working at McDonald's, wearing a uniform, driving an old car, you were all ashamed of me. But now that you know I have money, suddenly you're concerned about my financial well-being. I looked around the table at each of them. For 3 years, none of you offered to help me pay for groceries or medications. None of you offered to help with house repairs or car maintenance. But the minute you think I might have assets worth protecting, you want to help me manage my money. Connor, my grandson, was the only one who seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the tension. Grandma, I never thought you were embarrassing. I think you're pretty cool. Thank you, honey, I said, smiling at him. You're the only one who's never made me feel ashamed of who I am. After dinner, while the grandchildren played video games in the living room, the adults gathered in the kitchen. I could see Jessica and Michael having a whispered conversation in the corner, while Richard and Sarah helped me clear dishes. Finally, Jessica approached me. Mom, I owe you an apology. We shouldn't have made you feel bad about working at McDonald's. You were doing what you had to do. Were you apologizing, Jessica, or were you managing me now that you know I have money? She looked genuinely hurt by the question. Mom, that's not fair.
Isn't it? 3 months ago, you told me you were ashamed I was your mother. You wanted me to sell my house and move to a cheap senior home. But now that you know I have money, you're concerned about my well-being? Michael joined us, his face serious. Mom, we're family. We've always been concerned about your well-being. Have you, Michael? When's the last time you visited me before today? When's the last time you called just to see how I was doing, not because Jessica told you to? He couldn't answer, and that was answer enough. I want you both to understand something, I continued. The money your father left me has given me more than financial security. It's given me self-respect. For the first time in years, I don't have to apologize for who I am or where I work or what I drive. I looked at both of my children, these people I'd raised and sacrificed for and loved unconditionally. But the money also showed me something else. It showed me that my own children only value me when I have something they want. That's not true, Mom, Jessica said, but her voice was small. Prove it, I said simply. Show me that you loved and respected me when I was working at McDonald's. Show me that you were proud to call me your mother when I was wearing a polyester uniform and counting out change from my purse. Neither of them could do it because we all knew it wasn't true. That night, after everyone went home, I sat in my beautiful living room and made a decision that would complete my transformation from Dorothy Murphy to Dorothy Harrison. The next morning, I called Mr. Patterson and made an appointment to update my will. Mrs. Harrison, he said when I sat down in his office, what can I do for you today? I want to change my will, Mr. Patterson, substantially. He pulled out a legal pad and pen. What kind of changes are you thinking about? I want to establish a scholarship fund at the community college for older women who want to go back to school, learn new skills, start over. I want to call it the Frank Murphy Memorial Scholarship for Second Chances. Mr. Patterson was writing quickly. That's a wonderful tribute to your husband. How much are you thinking of dedicating to this fund?
$200,000, I said. I wanted to be substantial enough to help dozens of women over the years. He looked up from his writing. That's very generous. What about your children? I want to leave each of my grandchildren $10,000 for college expenses. But Jessica and Michael, I paused, choosing my words carefully. I want to leave them each a letter explaining why they're not inheriting anything else. Mr. Patterson set down his pen. Mrs. Harrison, are you sure about this? This is a significant decision that will permanently affect your family relationships. My family relationships were permanently affected the day my daughter told me she was ashamed I was her mother. I'm just making the consequences match the choices. Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes in how Jessica and Michael treated me. Jessica started calling more often, asking about my health, my activities, my investment strategy. Michael suggested family dinners, weekend visits, trips we could take together. The attention would have been flattering if I didn't know what was motivating it. They weren't interested in Dorothy the person. They were interested in Dorothy, the estate they hoped to inherit. I decided to test my theory. During one of Jessica's visits, I casually mentioned that I was thinking about donating money to charity. Charity? Jessica's voice got sharp. Mom, you need to be careful about that. There are so many scams targeting seniors. Maybe you should run any donations by us first. I was thinking about helping women who want to go back to school later in life, I said innocently. That's sweet, Mom, but you need to think about your own future first. What if you need expensive medical care? What if you have to go to a nursing home? You should keep your money for your own needs. But I have more money than I could possibly spend on myself. You don't know that, Mom. Healthcare costs are unpredictable. You could live for 20 more years. You need to plan for that. What she meant, of course, was that she was planning for her inheritance and didn't want me giving it away to strangers. Michael was even more direct when I mentioned the charity idea to him. Mom, I understand wanting to help people, but you have a family to think about. Jessica and I have kids to put through college, mortgages to pay, retirement savings to build. We've always assumed we'd inherit something to help with those expenses. You've assumed you'd inherit my money? Well, yeah, that's what parents do, right? They pass on their assets onto their children. It's the natural order of things. The natural order of things. According to Michael, the natural order was for me to work multiple jobs my entire life, save every penny, deny myself any comfort or dignity so that he and Jessica could inherit my money after spending years being ashamed of me. That weekend, I made a decision that felt terrifying and liberating. I was going to tell them about the will. I invited them both for Sunday dinner again, just the adults this time. Over dessert, I pulled out another folder. I have something else I'd like to discuss with you both. Jessica's eyes lit up, probably expecting another financial revelation that would benefit her somehow. I've updated my will, I said simply. Oh, Michael said, trying to sound casual. Anything we should know about? I think so. Yes. I opened the folder and pulled out copies of the relevant documents. I'm leaving the house to the community college to be sold with proceeds going to a scholarship fund for older women returning to school. Jessica's face went white. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm talking about the Frank Murphy Memorial Scholarship for Second Chances. It will help women who need to start over later in life, women who might be working minimum wage jobs because they don't have other options. Michael was scanning the documents with growing alarm. Mom, This says you're leaving $200,000 to this scholarship fund? That's right. What about us? Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. What about you, dear? I mean, what are you leaving us? I smiled gently. I'm leaving each of your children $10,000 for college expenses. I think education is important. The silence stretched on until Jessica finally found her voice. What about Michael and I? I'm leaving you both a letter explaining my decision. A letter? Mom, you're leaving Connor and Emma and Jake money for college, but you're cutting your own children out of your will completely? Not completely, I said calmly. You'll each get a very thoughtful letter. Jessica was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Mom, how could you do this to us? We're your family. Are you? I asked. Because family members don't tell each other they're ashamed of them. Family members don't try to convince their elderly mother to sell her home and move to a cheap facility just to avoid embarrassment. We were trying to help you, Jessica protested. No, sweetheart, you were trying to help yourselves. You were trying to manage me, control me, hide me away somewhere so you wouldn't have to explain why your mother worked at McDonald's. Richard, who'd been quiet through most of dinner, finally spoke up. Dorothy, I think you're making a mistake. Family should come first. I agree completely, Richard. That's why I'm so disappointed that my family didn't put me first when I needed them most.
Michael was studying the will documents like he might find a loophole. Mom, you can't be serious about this. This is our inheritance. We've been counting on it for our retirement planning. You've been counting on money I earned and saved while you were ashamed of me? I asked. Money you wanted me to spend on Sunset Manor so I'd be out of your way? That's not what we wanted, Jessica said, but even she didn't sound convinced. Then tell me, Jessica, when you suggested Sunset Manor, were you thinking about my happiness or your embarrassment? She couldn't answer, and we all knew why. I want you both to understand something, I continued. This money represents 45 years of work, 45 years of your father and me getting up early, staying late, taking second jobs, going without things we wanted so we could build security for our family. I looked at each of them. But somewhere along the way, you both decided that the woman who built that security wasn't good enough for you anymore, that she was an embarrassment to be managed rather than a mother to be cherished. Michael was getting angry now. So you're punishing us? You're going to give our inheritance to strangers? I'm not giving your inheritance to anyone, Michael. This was never your inheritance. This is my money to do with as I see fit. And I've decided to see fit to help women who find themselves in situations similar to what I was in. Women who need second chances, who need to know they have value regardless of where they work or what they wear. Jessica was sobbing openly now. Mom, please, we love you. We've always loved you. Have you? Because love isn't just a word, Jessica. Love is action. Love is respect. Love is being proud of someone even when they're wearing a McDonald's uniform. I stood up and walked to the window looking out at my beautiful neighborhood. Do you know what I realized when I found your father's money? I realized that I'd been living my life trying to earn love from people who'd already decided I wasn't worth their respect. When I turned back to them, they were both staring at me like they'd never seen me before. The scholarship fund isn't about punishing you, I said gently. It's about honoring women who work hard, who sacrifice for their families, who deserve dignity regardless of their circumstances. Women like I was before I found out I had other options. Richard was shaking his head. Dorothy, you're making this decision when you're emotional. Maybe you should take some time to think about it. I've had months to think about it, Richard.
And every time you or Jessica or Michael made it clear that you're only interested in me now that you know I have money, it confirmed that I'm making the right choice. The evening ended badly, with both Jessica and Michael storming out after making it clear they thought I was being vindictive and unfair. But for the first time in years, I slept peacefully that night. Over the following weeks, both of my children tried different approaches to change my mind. Jessica sent flowers with apologetic notes. Michael called daily to check on my health and well-being. Richard even showed up at my door with a proposal for how they could help me manage my estate more effectively. But it was too late. I'd seen who they really were when they thought I had nothing to offer them, and I'd seen who they became when they thought I had something they wanted. Neither version was the loving, respectful children I'd raised them to be. The scholarship fund was established on Frank's birthday, 6 months after I'd found his secret papers. The community college held a small ceremony to announce the fund, and several local women came forward immediately to apply for assistance. One of them was Maria Santos, a 58-year-old woman who'd worked as a housekeeper her entire adult life and wanted to get training to become a certified nursing assistant. When she thanked me through tears for giving her a chance at a better life, I knew I'd made the right decision. Another was Patricia Williams, 62, who wanted to learn computer skills so she could get office work instead of cleaning buildings at night. She reminded me so much of myself, proud, hard-working, but trapped by circumstances beyond her control. Jessica and Michael attended the ceremony, sitting in the back row with expressions that mixed anger with resignation. Afterwards, Jessica approached me. "Mom, I'm proud of what you're doing." And for a moment, I thought she might finally understand. "But I still think you should reconsider the will. We are your family, even if we've made mistakes." "Jessica," I said gently, "the will isn't about making mistakes. It's about making choices. You and Michael chose to be embarrassed by me rather than proud of me. You chose to see me as a problem to be managed rather than a mother to be cherished." She started to argue, but I held my hand. The scholarship recipients will never be embarrassed by me. They'll never ask me to hide who I am or where I came from. They'll be grateful for the chance I'm giving them, the same chance I gave you when I worked multiple jobs to put you through college. A year later, the scholarship fund had helped 15 women change their lives. I attended every graduation, every certification ceremony, every success story that my money made possible. These women understood what it meant to struggle, to work hard, to be undervalued by society. They appreciated second chances because they knew how rare they were. My children and I maintained a polite but distant relationship. They still called occasionally, still invited me to major family events, but the easy intimacy we'd once shared was gone. They knew I saw through their sudden interest in my welfare, and I knew they were counting down the days until I died so they could contest my will. But you know what, honey? I didn't care anymore. Dorothy Murphy had spent her whole life trying to earn love from people who took her for granted. Dorothy Harrison knew her worth and refused to settle for anything less than genuine respect. 2 years after I changed my name and my will, I was sitting in my beautiful living room reading thank you letters from scholarship recipients when the phone rang. It was Connor, Jessica's son, calling from college. "Grandma, I wanted to thank you for the college money. It's really helping." "You're welcome, sweetheart. How are your studies going?" "Good, but that's not really why I'm calling." He paused, and I could hear him take a deep breath. "I wanted you to know that I think what you did was right. With the scholarship fund, I mean." I was surprised by his words. "What do you mean, honey?" "I remember that day at Walmart, Grandma. I was with Mom when she said those things to you. I was embarrassed too, but not because of you. I was embarrassed because of how mean she was being. You didn't deserve that." tears sprang to my eyes, y'all. In all this time, no one from my family had ever acknowledged what that day had meant to me. "Thank you for saying that, Connor," I whispered. "I've been thinking about it a lot since I got to college. You know what the difference is between you and Mom? You worked because you had to. She volunteers because she wants to look good to her friends. You were providing for yourself with dignity, and she made you feel ashamed of it. That wasn't right."
5 years have passed now since I became Dorothy Harrison. The scholarship fund has helped over 50 women change their lives. I've traveled to places Frank and I only dreamed of seeing. I've made friends who value me for who I am, not what I have. I've built a life that makes me proud. Jessica and Michael still call, still visit occasionally, still ask pointed questions about my health and my estate planning, but I'm not Dorothy Murphy anymore, the woman who desperately wanted their approval. I'm Dorothy Harrison, a woman who knows her own worth. The letters I've written for them to receive after I die are honest, but not cruel. I've explained that love isn't inheritance, that respect isn't automatic, and that family relationships require mutual care and consideration. I've told them that I hope they'll learn from my decision and treat their own children better than they treated me. But mostly, I've told them that I forgive them. Not because what they did was acceptable, but because forgiveness freed me to become the woman I was always meant to be. Sometimes when I'm sitting in my beautiful home, surrounded by thank you letters from scholarship recipients and photos from my travels, I think about that day at Walmart when Jessica said she was ashamed I was her mother. That moment broke my heart, but it also broke me free from a life where I was undervalued and unappreciated. Frank's money gave me financial freedom, but changing my name gave me something more important: the freedom to become someone new, someone who demanded respect, someone who understood that love without respect isn't love at all. And you know what, honey? Dorothy Harrison is someone I'm proud to be, McDonald's uniform or not, because at the end of the day, it's not what you wear or where you work that defines you. It's how you treat people, especially the people who love you unconditionally. My children forgot that lesson, but Dorothy Harrison never will. The last thing I want y'all to remember is this: it's never too late to change your life, to demand the respect you deserve, to become the person you were meant to be. Sometimes the people who should love us most are the ones who hold us back the most. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to walk away from people who don't appreciate your worth, even if they're your own family. Frank always said I was extraordinary, and it took losing everything and finding myself again to finally believe him. Now I wake up every morning as Dorothy Harrison, a woman who knows exactly how much she's worth. And honey, that's worth more than any inheritance I could ever leave behind.